I never thought I would be publicly disowned right in the middle of my own sister's graduation, before hundreds of strangers, under a sky full of applause and flashing cameras. But that's exactly what happened. No warning, no explanation, not even a flicker of mercy. Just my father's voice at the podium. From this day on, our family no longer has any connection to Emily. And the worst part? I was still sitting there, frozen, as every pair of eyes began cutting through me, like cold blades. My name is Emily Walker, 27 years old, and that day was my sister's graduation, Madeline Walker, from Princeton. I arrived nearly an hour early, not because I was excited, but because I needed to see if they really had the audacity to go through with it. I had suspected it. I just didn't expect they'd choose that day to finish it all. From a distance, Princeton Stadium shimmered like a miniature Broadway stage. Flags fluttered in the May breeze, loudspeakers played celebratory music. Families arrived together, dressed to impress, carrying flowers, balloons, and an overwhelming sense of pride. I walked alone. No flowers, no name on the guest list, no official invitation. At the security gate, a young volunteer looked me up, scanned the list, then frowned. "What's your name again, ma'am?" "Emily Walker, Madeline Walker's sister." Could you wait a moment, please?" She stepped behind the desk and whispered to a supervisor. A minute later, they returned with a plain white lanyard. No logo, no ribbon, no name. Just one word printed in cheap Times New Roman font. Guest. I had designed the original branding for my mother's nonprofit, the Walker Initiative. I chose every font, every icon. And now they handed me a piece of paper with no soul, no meaning, barely more than a random tag for a passerby. I clipped it onto my coat and walked toward the seating area like a stranger arriving at her own funeral. I spotted them instantly. My mother, Angela Walker, wore an ivory shift dress, a Chanel purse on her wrist, eyes sharp as ice sweeping the crowd. My father, Gregory Walker, stood in a gray suit, phone in hand, chatting with a man I assumed was an old colleague. Between them, Madeline glowed in her black graduation gown and gold honor cords. She looked like a living advertisement for the American dream. I slowed down. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to savor the last few seconds of still being considered their daughter. My mother saw me first. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't happy either. She raised an eyebrow slightly and said, as if I were a barista she'd bumped into by accident, "Oh, Emily. You came too?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "I got the invitation, maybe a forwarded copy." She let out a dry chuckle. "Someone must have missed the final list." Gregory didn't even look at me. No handshake, no greeting. He kept staring at his phone, quietly avoiding me like I was a stain on a fresh shirt. Madeline stepped in for a quick hug, more like a handshake than an embrace. "I'm happy for you, you look amazing." Thanks, I'm really glad you came." Her voice sounded like an apology hidden in a sentence. But her eyes darted sideways, waiting for a cue from our mother to back off. I checked the seating chart posted on a large easel at the main gate. Walker family. Row A, seats 2 to 8. Listed below were Dad's name, Mom's, Madeline's, and 2 honored guests. My name wasn't there. I took my guest badge and quietly sat in the far left section. To my right, an elderly man was asleep. To my left, a child scribbled on the ceremony program. At 10:15 a.m., Gregory Walker took the stage as music echoed around the stadium. He adjusted the mic, smiled, and began his speech as if it were just another polished family moment. "Today, we gather to honor the remarkable effort and intellect of our daughter, Madeline Walker." Applause. Cameras clicking. But today also marks the beginning of a new chapter for our family. My body tensed. We've made a difficult decision. From now on, we will no longer maintain relationships with individuals who no longer align with our family's values and vision. This includes our youngest daughter, Emily. No gasps. No whispers. Just the sound of plastic chairs creaking, and a faint gust brushing through the rows of flags. I didn't stand, I didn't scream, I just sat there, hands resting on my knees, like a ghost. Quietly pronounced dead. Madeline looked down. Silent. She didn't object. A woman behind me whispered, loud enough for others to hear. Did he just say that? Another voice replied. Who does that to their kid at a graduation? I took a deep breath, looked straight at the stage, and knew, this time, they had erased me for real. I left right after the speech. Didn't wait for names to be called. Didn't stay for photos. Didn't say congratulations. While my sister received her honors, I walked away like someone exiled from a home that never wanted me. I strolled down Nassau Street, passing groups laughing, hugging, crying tears of joy. No one noticed me. Just like the past 27 years of my life. I got back to my small apartment in Hoboken as the sun began to dip. The room was still the same, silent, washed in golden light through the windows, ceiling fan humming faintly. I tossed the guest badge onto the table and collapsed onto the sofa like a survivor of a car wreck. But truthfully, that wreck happened long ago. Maybe I always knew. No. I did know. I just thought that if I tried long enough, loved hard enough, maybe someday it would be different. I pulled open the drawer under the coffee table and took out a stack of old letters tied with ribbon. Each one a distorted memory, proof of the twisted version of love I once called home. The first was a Christmas card from when I was 20. A photo of the family in front of the tree. I remembered that day. I had chosen the tree, strung the lights, baked the cookies. But when the card arrived 3 weeks later, I realized I'd been cut from the picture. Not blurred, not cropped. Removed. Cleanly, precisely, like I was never there. I remember asking my mom, "Mom, where am I in this card?" She shrugged. The photo looked better with just the three of us. It was for clients. They need a clear, consistent image. A clear image. I used to think that was a temporary thing. Now I understand. I was never part of the image they wanted to keep. The second letter was from the year I graduated college. I majored in communications at Rutgers. Not as prestigious as Princeton, but I paid my own tuition, worked all 4 years, graduated with honors. No one in the family came to my graduation. A few days later, I received a letter. Not a congratulations note, but a health insurance bill. My mother wrote, "From now on, you're on your own, you're an adult now." And Madeline? When she completed her program in England, the whole family flew to London, hired a professional photographer, popped champagne, and printed the photos into a suede-bound album. I got a PDF attachment in an email titled, "The Walker Family, An Unforgettable Moment." The third letter was last year's Thanksgiving invitation. It was sent to my apartment. But the envelope said Erica Walker, a neighbor who had moved out 2 years earlier. I figured my mother had copied the wrong address from an old list. When I messaged her, she replied, "Oh, must have been a small mix-up. Anyway, there'll be a lot of people. It doesn't really matter whether you're there or not." Tiny cuts, so small they almost felt insignificant. But stacked over more than 2 decades, they became a wound that never healed. I remember another time. I was sitting at the dinner table when Madeline was told she'd be interning at the Family Foundation, where my mother was the executive director. I had submitted my application 3 months earlier. What about me? I applied too. My mother glanced at me over her wineglass. Madeline had a stronger resume. Besides, you lack leadership qualities. You're too independent, not a cultural fit. I used to admire what they called organizational culture. Now, I call it a systematic filter. I got up, walked to the bookshelf, and pulled down an old photo album. In the center was a photo from my 8th birthday. I remember it so clearly: strawberry cake, 6 classmates, and my favorite green dress. But in the picture? just Madeline and the cake. I stood at the edge, blurry, like a stranger who'd accidentally wandered into the frame. I sighed softly. My eyes didn't well up anymore. Maybe the tears had run dry long ago. I put the album back and opened my phone, pulled up Facebook. I searched for my mother's latest album, Madeline's graduation, the Walker family's pride. Every photo, every comment, every congratulatory message, it was as if I had never existed. I wasn't tagged, I wasn't mentioned. I checked the family info section. Under children there was only one name, Madeline. Truth is, they didn't disown me yesterday. They disowned me a long time ago. They just stopped pretending now. I put the phone down. I felt no more anger, no more expectations, just a sharp, cold clarity. I wasn't lost. I was erased. Slowly, systematically, and deliberately. And now, for the first time, I was ready to look at that truth directly. Not to seek forgiveness, but to find myself, among whatever remained after the storm they called family. I couldn't sleep that night. Not out of rage or sadness, but because a single thought kept spiraling through my mind. If they could erase me from photos, invitations, family dinners, what else had they done that I didn't know about? I sat up around 3 a.m, turned on the desk lamp and pulled my old laptop from under the bed. It powered on slowly, the fan wheezing like an old animal on its last breath. I had used this machine back when I worked part-time, entering data for the Walker Initiative, the family nonprofit founded and managed by my mother, like a corporate facade. I still had second-tier access. They never revoked my credentials. Maybe they thought I wasn't smart enough to use it. Or simpler, they forgot I even existed. The screen loaded into a complicated folder structure: finance, partners, fixed assets, internal legal files. I scrolled aimlessly at first, until I stopped at a tiny folder labeled Walker Holdings, Q3 Update. I clicked. A PDF opened with the title Transfer Authorization, Cape Moo Property, NG. My blood ran cold. Cape Moo, the only property my father had left me in his will. The cream-colored house, with chipped wooden porches and stairs leading down to the beach. The place where I helped him repaint the fence the summer before my senior year of college. I scrolled to the last page. There it was. The signature block. My full legal name, Emily Grace Walker, bolded above a forged scrawl that was laughably fake. I stared at it. The E lacked the loop I always wrote. The W snaked unnaturally, and the ending stroke was jagged and sloppy. Down to my signature, this wasn't it. Next to it, a notary seal. Name? Savannah Doyle. That name froze me. Savannah was my cousin, Jerry's daughter. The same Jerry who had served as the foundation's accountant for nearly 10 years. I opened another document. A notarized contract of the same transfer, also sealed by Savannah. Then another file, internal meeting minutes. Asset transfer for business use approval. It included this line. Transfer ownership of Cape May property to M&W Holdings LLC, managed by Madeline Walker. My throat clenched. Adina. My sister. The same one who posted photos from her boutique launch in New York, captioned, "A dream realized, built from love and family legacy." I gagged. Nothing came out, but my throat burned. I ran to my filing cabinet, tore open the drawer, and pulled out the will my father had sent me the year he passed. I had guarded it more closely than anything else, because he was the only one who ever looked at me without judgment. I flipped to page 4. Section 5A. Grant full ownership of the Cape May property in the state of New Jersey, to my youngest daughter, Emily Grace Walker. No conditions, no footnotes, a direct gift. They had forged my signature, faked the transfer, used family to legitimize it, then sold it, used my inheritance to fund her business, without even asking me. I closed the laptop, trembling in shock. Not because of losing money or property, but because of the feeling that I had been treated as if I had no right to exist. I immediately called Aunt Partha, my dad's youngest sister, the only person in the family who had ever stood by me. She picked up after 2 rings, her voice hoarse with sleep. "Emily, what's going on, sweetheart?" I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did you know the house in Cape May had been transferred?" She was silent for a few seconds, then sighed. "Yes, I knew. But your mother said it was for tax purposes, that they had to restructure the assets to make reporting easier." I thought, "You believed her? That it was just temporary and they'd return it?" "I didn't know what to do, Emily. I'm sorry." I dropped the phone as if it weighed 100 pounds. I didn't blame her. I just realized I had been betrayed by an entire system. A system where everyone turned away in the name of keeping the peace. I opened my cabinet, pulled out an old stack of papers, lease agreements, bank account confirmations, and a scanned copy of my real signature for comparison. I needed evidence. I needed the truth, recorded, on paper, with names, with legal stamps. Because they could erase me from the pictures. But I wouldn't let them erase me from the legal record. I turned on the printer and printed all the files I had found. I clipped them together and placed them inside a deep burgundy plastic folder. The embossed word, confidential, on the cover felt almost like mockery. I checked the clock. 5:42 in the morning. Dawn was breaking. The first light of a new day slipped in through the curtains. And I knew. Today would not be like the days before. I couldn't sit still any longer. After what I had uncovered, silence meant complicity. And I had been silent for too long, letting them pull the strings of my life like a puppet without a spine. As soon as sunlight touched the edge of my apartment window, I began to act. Holding the folder printed the night before, I called David Stone, the attorney who once helped me settle a lease dispute 3 years ago. He wasn't a big-name lawyer, but he had what I needed now. He wasn't afraid to challenge power. David answered after 2 rings. "Emmy, what brings you to me at 6 in the morning?" "I need to file a lawsuit. And I need to do it right, fast, and all the way." After a few seconds of silence, David said, "I'll be at the office by 8:30. Bring everything you have. Don't email it, bring it yourself." I printed extra copies of the original will, the PDFs containing forged signatures, the notarized documents by Savannah, and the transfer records showing the property in Madeline's name. I packed everything into a dark brown leather folder. The only graduation gift my father ever gave me. By 8:20, I was standing in front of the small law office on Washington Avenue. David greeted me with a skeptical look, but as he skimmed through the folder, his expression quickly turned serious. "This is forged." "Not just that. It's an entire system of deceit built to erase me from my inheritance." David nodded, his voice lowering. "I'll start drafting the complaint immediately, but Emily, this isn't a simple case. You're going after a state-level nonprofit, a well-connected family. Are you ready?" I looked him straight in the eye. "They didn't just steal money. They stole my identity, my existence. I have nothing left to lose." That afternoon, I called Aunt Partha again. This time, my voice didn't shake. "Can you help me? You were at the family meeting last year, right? The one where my mom said she was going to adjust the assets?" She went silent. I expected another excuse. But then she sighed softly. "I have a recording, not on purpose. I had my phone recording to remember some financial details. But there's a part where she talks about cutting Emily out of the paperwork to make things easier. Can you send it to me?" 10 minutes later, the recording came through. My hand trembled as I hit play. My mother's voice rang out clearly. "Let her think her name's still on the documents. Once everything's done, we'll just say the accountant made a mistake. Emily's too timid. She won't sue." I sent the recording straight to David. He replied almost instantly. "I'll include this in the filing as corroborating evidence. Even better if you have emails or texts. I started retracing old trails. I still had access to the internal email system from when I worked for the foundation. Fortunately, they hadn't changed the password or revoked my access. A fatal mistake. I found 3 emails marked internal do not share. An email from my mother to her legal advisor. Madeline needs early access to the Cape May property. I want the name transfer expedited. Emily doesn't need to know. An email from my sister to her best friend. Mom said don't worry, Emily won't sue, and even if she does, no one will believe her. She doesn't have a place in the family image. A text exchange between my father and Savannah. Help me with a document using Emily's signature. Just make it look close. It's just for formality. I saved everything. Even though my stomach churned, every word was like an arrow piercing the mask they'd worn for years. A week later, David and I officially filed the complaint in Hudson County Court. The case was titled, Emily G. Walker v. Walkers, the Walker Foundation and Related Parties. Attached were all the documents. The original will, the property map, the transfer contracts with forged signatures, the recording, the internal emails, and the side-by-side signature comparison. I signed the complaint with a strange sense of calm. Not hatred, but the cold clarity of someone who finally understood the war she was in. That night, I sat alone at my small dining table, staring out at the lights of Hoboken. After so many years, I felt like I existed. Not as Madeline's shadow. Not as my mother's flaw. I was Emily, the one who stood up, the one reclaiming her name. And they would pay for what they had done. I arrived at my mother's office on a gray Wednesday morning in New Jersey, the sky hanging low, as if the whole city held its breath with me. No appointment, no warning. I wanted her to know that this time, I was the one opening the door, not knocking. The Walker Initiative sat on the 17th floor of a sleek glass tower in downtown Newark. From the outside, it looked like a PR firm. But inside, it was a power structure disguised as charity, where community projects wore the mask of altruism, while the truth was buried beneath layers of prestige. I walked past the reception desk. The young woman at the front, new, clearly unfamiliar with my face, started to stop me. "Do you have an appointment with Mrs. Walker?" I looked her straight in the eye, my voice calm. "No need. I'm her daughter." She froze. A second later, I was already walking straight down the glass hallway toward the executive office at the far end. I opened the door without knocking. My mother, Angela Walker, 60 years old, her silver hair curled to perfection, was sitting behind her desk. A framed photo with Madeline tilted at a 45-degree angle, just as always. She wasn't surprised. She didn't flinch, not even a blink. "Emily." "Hello, Mother." I didn't sit. I stood. I felt taller than her. Not in height, but in presence. I no longer bowed my head. "It seems you've found out," she began, pouring water from a crystal carafe, like she was hosting a business partner. "I know the Cape May house was sold. I know who forged the signature. I know about the recording where you said, keeping me out, made things easier to manage." She didn't blink. Just lifted her glass and sipped. "Everything I did was for the greater good. The foundation's reputation, the family's image. That's what matters most." I laughed. Not loud. Not bitter. Just a short, chilling laugh that ran down my spine. Have you ever wondered why that image only had room for one child? Why in the Walker family only one face was worthy of showing up? Madeline said. "Fits, she performs well. She knows how to present herself to the media. You know about me. You've always been too strong-willed, too independent, unmanageable. In this world you can't survive if you don't know how to bow at the right time." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel pain. I felt clarity. Clear like the sunlight pouring through the glass, stripping away every mask. "So you admit it. You erased me from everything because I didn't fit the mold you created." She set her glass down, eyes sharp as razors locked on mine. You always wanted your own path, well now you have it. What are you doing here, looking for an apology? Hoping to return? I stepped closer to her desk and pulled a thick envelope from my bag. I placed it down like someone playing the final card in a high-stakes game. These are copies of all the legal documents. The forged signatures, the notarized files, the internal emails, the recording, and the lawsuit. She faltered. Just for a moment. But I saw it. A hairline crack at the corner of her tight lips. You're going to destroy everything your father built? My father left that house to me. You and Madeline sold it and funneled the money into a private company. If reclaiming what's mine is considered destruction, then yes, I will destroy. All the way. I leaned forward, meeting the gaze that once suffocated me through my entire childhood. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I'm not here to beg for recognition. I'm here to say that from now on, I don't need my name in any story you tell. Because I'm telling my own. Angele leaned back, arms crossed, that mocking smile returning to her face. You think suing us is simple? The press, the media, our partners, you'll drag the whole family through the mud. No, you did that yourselves. I'm just turning on the lights so the world can see. I turned to leave. No permission. No bow. I knew she was watching. I knew every muscle in her face was clenching to maintain composure. And I knew. She finally realized the Emily she once knew no longer existed. Out in the hallway, I passed a row of framed photographs. Major events from the foundation dating back to 2005. Each frame a milestone in the family's public success. I wasn't in any of them. But this time, it didn't hurt. Because when you've been erased to the point of invisibility, being seen through your own actions is a thunderous slap. And I had just delivered the first one. 3 days after that confrontation, everything erupted. Not quietly, not gradually. It was an explosion at the heart of the perfect image my family had spent more than 20 years crafting. I was making my morning coffee when my phone began buzzing nonstop. Messages stacked up, old classmates, co-workers, even people I hadn't heard from since college. Emily, have you seen the news? It's front page now. They're calling it the Walker Initiative's moral crisis. I opened my laptop and logged into Nonprofit Integrity Watch, an independent watchdog organization that tracks charitable foundations. The bold headline filled the screen. Board signatures, shady transfers, shocking recordings, the Walker Family Foundation under fire. Right below it was a photo of my mother, Angela Walker, exiting her office with a face like steel. But this time, there was no strategic smile, no controlling stare. Just tightly pressed lips and tense cheeks. The article opened with a quote from the recording. Emily doesn't fit the family image. We need a consistent, streamlined face that aligns with our branding. My mother's voice echoed, clear as if she were standing in my living room. The next section was my father's voice, soft but unmistakably confirming. She used to read everything. We have to make sure Emily doesn't find out until after it's finalized. I scrolled down. The article listed the evidence submitted to the investigators. The original will, naming me as the sole inheritor of the Cape May house. The transfer document with a forged signature. The notary stamp. From Savannah Doyle, a direct relative. Random emails from my mother, referring to my removal as a branding strategy. A message from Madeline to a friend. She won't sue. Emily never knew how to fight. That last line made me laugh. Not bitterly, not cruelly, just like a survivor reading her own obituary, and knowing she was still alive. By noon, major media outlets picked it up. The New York Post ran a headline. Behind the lies. Prestigious New Jersey family accused of asset manipulation and erasing their own daughter. CBS aired a 7-minute evening segment, including interviews with 3 major donors who announced a freeze on all partnerships with the Walker Initiative. And on social media? A storm. The hashtag Walker scandal hit the top 5 trending topics on Twitter in under 6 hours. The recordings were shared hundreds of thousands of times, one user commented. "This isn't a family dispute. This is a silent purge of a daughter who didn't fit the mold." I didn't answer a single message. I didn't speak. I didn't post. I let the truth speak for itself. That night, an email quietly appeared in my inbox. It was from the Walker Initiative's address. No subject line, no greeting. Just one sentence. "We are preparing a unified statement. We hope to include a comment from Miss Emily Walker as a gesture of goodwill." I deleted the email. I didn't respond. They no longer had the right to use my voice to salvage their image. The next day, my mother held an emergency press conference at the foundation's headquarters. I didn't attend, but the live stream spread everywhere. She stood in the middle of the room with a stiff smile, repeating the same old phrases. "Our family is going through deep emotional pain. All decisions were made with the intention to protect the collective. The situation has been misunderstood and taken out of context." Not a single apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing. But people no longer believed her. That evening I got a message from Louisa, an old friend who used to work in the foundation's marketing department. "Louisa, I quit. But I still have an old communication strategy draft that says, avoid using Emily's image in any public-facing materials. It does not align with the current branding direction. Want it?" I replied, "Yes, send me everything." The next day, I sat in a small coffee shop in Hoboken, reviewing every line of the documents. Each word was a pair of shears, cutting me off from inheritance, from family, from identity. But this time, I was the one holding the scissors. The trial began on a freezing October morning. The Hudson County Courthouse wasn't grand like old carpeted hallways. Flickering fluorescent lights, and the smell of damp paperwork mixed with cheap coffee. But to me, this place was a battlefield. And for the first time in my life, I was here to defend. I was here to end it. I sat next to David, my attorney. He flipped through the files, checking each tab, each seal, like a conductor preparing for the crescendo. Across from us, my mother, Angela Walker, wore a cream-colored suit, trying to appear composed. My father kept his head down, eyes vacant, and Madeline didn't look at anyone. She played with her phone as if this hearing were just a rescheduled manicure appointment. The judge was a woman in her early 50s, face stern, voice hard as concrete. She had no patience for manipulation. I knew, today, the only thing that mattered in this room was the truth. David stood first. "Your Honor, we request that the following documents be entered into the record. The original will, drafted by Mr. Gregory Walker, property transfer documents with evidence of forgery, an audio recording in which the defendant admits to excluding the plaintiff for image reasons, and internal emails that demonstrate a coordinated effort to deprive my client, Emily Walker, of her legal ownership." The judge nodded. "Accepted. Proceed." David presented the will, the same one I had preserved like a sacred artifact. "This document, Your Honor, was notarized by an independent attorney, filed while Mr. Gregory Walker was alive, and was never legally revoked or replaced. It clearly assigns full ownership of the Cape May property to Emily Walker. No objections." The judge flipped through each page, then asked, "Does the defense have any evidence that contradicts the legal validity of this will?" My mother's attorney, a gray-haired man named Mathers, stood hesitantly. "We do not have another original document, but we believe this will may not reflect the decedent's final intent." "Intent is not the law, Mr. Mathers. Ink on paper is," the judge interrupted, voice as sharp as a hammer. The courtroom froze. I could hear my mother's breath grow heavier. Madeline finally looked up, frowning at me. David continued. He played the recording where my mother spoke about removing me from the family image, because I didn't fit the brand. Her voice echoed through the courtroom, cold, calculated, unmistakable. Gee, doesn't fit the story we're telling. We need consistency. We need a clean image. A second later, my father's voice followed. Just make sure Emily doesn't find out before it's done. She's too soft, she won't do anything. The judge looked toward the defense. Mrs. Angela Walker, do you deny that the voice in this recording is yours? My mother said nothing. Her hands clenched tightly, knuckles turning white. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. David placed the final document on the table, property transfer paperwork, with the forged signature, and the notary seal from Savannah Doyle. Emily's signature was forged. A comparison with her verified legal documents shows clear discrepancies, and the use of a family member as the notary further proves a deliberate pattern of deception. The judge struck her gavel. I've heard enough. She flipped through the case file one last time, silently, for what felt like an eternity. This court rules that the property in Cape May, New Jersey, per the valid will, shall be returned to the rightful owner, Emily Grace Walker. I inhaled sharply. My whole body felt like it had escaped a chokehold. Furthermore, the Walker Initiative's financial operations will be frozen for 90 days to allow for a full administrative and tax investigation by the Office of the State Comptroller. A loud "no" rang out. My mother stood. This is a setup. She's destroying this family over one meaningless house. I stood too, facing her, my voice calm as a lake after a storm. This isn't about a house. It's about the fact that you thought I was worth nothing. Madeline whispered something to her lawyer, then walked out of the courtroom without a word. I didn't look back, I looked forward. The judge closed the hearing with one sentence. Justice is not about satisfying emotions. It is about restoring what is right. Court is adjourned. I stepped outside with David, the midday sun hitting my face. It was blinding. But I didn't shield my eyes. For the first time in 27 years, I walked without the shadow of my family behind me. I didn't need their acknowledgement anymore. I had the truth. And this time I held it in my hands. No one could take it away. 6 months after the trial, I stood barefoot in the living room of the Cape May house, my feet touching the newly polished hardwood floors. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting a warm glow on the freshly painted beige walls. The house they had once erased from me no longer felt like a legal trophy. It was a beginning. I didn't choose to destroy it, as many had suggested. I didn't turn it into a personal retreat, like Madeline did for her extravagant 30th birthday party. Instead, I chose to give it back, to those who had also been erased like I was. I used part of the restored funds from the lawsuit to transform the house into the Lighthouse Project, a creative and healing center for women who had grown up in the foster care system. Women who had been lost in temporary shelters, evaluation reports, and the pitying eyes of society. Women like me who hadn't shared the same background, but carried the same feeling of being excluded from the one place that was supposed to be home. No flashy signs, no loud media coverage, just a small wooden plaque hanging at the gate. We see you, and you don't have to be perfect to belong. The first group had only 4 residents. They arrived with small suitcases, guarded expressions, and an energy like they were bracing for interrogation. But after a few weeks, I heard them laughing. I saw them paint, write, cook. The house began to breathe. One evening, I sat in the kitchen with Raina, a 24-year-old who had cycled through 3 failed adoptive homes. She folded a stack of sketch papers and said, "Emily, I never thought I'd feel at peace like this." I looked at her, my heart both heavy and light. I never thought I'd believe in that feeling again either. But it's real. It starts when you stop asking permission to exist. I didn't tell the girls about the trial, about my mother, about Madeline. I didn't need that story to define me anymore. A week after the lighthouse opened, I received a thin envelope, no sender name. The handwriting on the front was slanted, sharp, but hesitant. I knew immediately who it was from. I opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper with 12 handwritten words. I was wrong. I'm sorry it took so long to see it. No signature, but I didn't need it. Madeline. I sat on the wooden chair by the window, looking out to the backyard, where the girls were hanging up their paintings on a clothesline. The letter rested in my hand, so light it felt like it might vanish if I held it too tightly. I didn't cry. I didn't feel relieved. I folded it gently, placed it in a small box, along with the guest tag from that graduation day, and a copy of the judge's ruling. Not to remember the pain, but to remind myself that I survived. I rose, and I didn't need anyone's permission to do it. My mother never reached out again. My father disappeared from the media after the foundation was frozen. I heard through whispers they were trying to rebuild from the ruins. But this time, without the protection of reputation. And me? I started hosting anonymous writing circles. A group of women would gather each week in Cape May, sitting around a long wooden table, sharing passages they had never dared read aloud. Memories, silences forced upon them, and anger they had never been allowed to release. I didn't say much, I just listened. One day, a girl named Marley, 19, unhoused since she was 14, handed me a folded note and whispered, "I wrote this about you." I opened it. The first line read, "She didn't need to scream to be heard. She chose to stand when the world told her to sit. And because of that, I believe I can stand too." I bit my lip. My eyes burned, but not from pain, from the quiet, steady truth that I had built something real, not a monument of revenge, but a place to begin again. I stepped outside to the porch. The Cape May evening sky was stained orange and red. The sea breeze swept in salty and cool, carrying the scent of fresh wood, paint, and hope. I looked at the house once more. No longer a place of pain. No longer a courtroom victory. Now it was home. But this time, a home for those who never had a place to belong. And I, Emily Grace Walker, no longer needed to be accepted. I had built a world of my own, from the ashes of everything that once tried to burn me down. My story isn't about a lawsuit. It's not even about reclaiming a house. It's about reclaiming myself, after being ruthlessly erased by my own family. I've learned that not everyone born into your life deserves to be called family. And sometimes healing begins the moment you stop hoping they'll change. Forgiveness isn't about setting them free. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of old wounds. Today, I don't need their recognition. I have myself. And that is enough. What do you think of Emily's choice? Was she right to let go of the past to build her own future? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful family stories to come. I never thought I'd tell this story, but after 14 years of silence, I'm ready to uncover the past. A past my mother wanted buried forever. If you think tragedies only happen in movies, then listen to me. Because sometimes, the cruelest things don't come from enemies, but from the very person who gave you life. And it all started the summer I turned 12. The summer that turned me invisible in my own home. My name is Sophia Reynolds, born and raised in Portland, Oregon. Before 2011, my family was ordinary. My parents and I lived in a small turquoise house on the corner of 42nd Street. My father, Matthew, was a civil engineer, stern but always knew how to make me laugh. My mom, Diane, was a freelance accountant who stayed home more often. Every morning, Dad would drive me to school, while Mom made dinner. There was always creamy mushroom soup, my favorite. We weren't rich, but we had enough. I had books to read, my own bike, and parents who listened. On winter nights, we'd wrap ourselves in blankets and watch old movies, with Dad laughing loudly and mimicking actors until I rolled on the floor. Mom would give me a playful glare, then hand me another piece of cake. That was the peaceful time I still dream of. Before everything shattered, like a mirror thrown against a wall. It was a Wednesday, I remember clearly. Dad left the house earlier than usual because he had to drive to a new construction site in the southern suburbs. I stood at the door, waving goodbye, and he winked. "I'll take you to the river this afternoon just like I promised." I didn't know that would be the last time I saw that look in his eyes. Around 4 o'clock the landline rang. My mother answered and her face turned pale in seconds. She collapsed into the chair, still holding the phone, stammering, "No. No way. Matt? No, it can't be." I stood frozen, my heart pounding. When she hung up, she looked at me with empty eyes. "Your father, there was an accident. His car flipped at the bend. He's gone, Sophia." I thought she would pull me into a hug, but she didn't. She just sat there like a stone statue, and I, a 12-year-old girl, had to bury the scream inside my own chest. The following weeks were hell. The funeral was quiet. No one said much. Friends came and went. But my mom changed completely. She stopped cooking, never asked about school, didn't even look me in the eyes. At first I thought she was grieving, but then I realized she wasn't broken, she was escaping something, and it had nothing to do with my dad. 3 months after the funeral, Mom started getting phone calls in the evenings. I'd walk past her room and see the phone light blinking and hear her soft laughter. One time, I peeked through the door, and she quickly turned off the screen. "You knock before entering." "Sorry, who are you talking to?" "It's none of your business, Sophia." A week later, I walked into the kitchen and saw her wearing earrings and lipstick, things she hadn't worn since Dad died. "Where are you going?" "Out to meet a friend." "What friend?" "Robert." I'd known him for a few weeks. That name, Robert, hit me like thunder on a sunny day. My mom, a widow for not even 4 months, was dating. I didn't say anything. I didn't know how. I just stood there, holding my glass of water, staring at the woman who once taught me that love was sacred, something to cherish, now, acting like it could be replaced overnight. 2 weeks later, she brought Robert home. He was tall, had slicked back hair, and a fake smile that gave me chills. But what scared me even more was his daughter. Lily, 6 years old, with golden hair tied in pink ribbons and big round eyes. Like a child straight out of a perfect Christmas card. "Sophia, this is Robert and Lily," Mom said, gripping my shoulder. "They'll be moving in with us." I took a step back. "What did you just say?" "Robert needs a fresh start. And Lily needs a good big sister." "But, what about Dad? It hasn't even been 6 months since the funeral." Mom frowned. Her voice went cold. "That's over, Sophia. You need to learn to accept it." "Accept it?" It felt like my world crumbled again, and this time, it wasn't because my dad died. It was because the only person I had left chose to abandon me when I needed her most. I used to think nothing could be worse than losing my dad. But I was wrong. Because being forgotten in your own home, that's what kills you. When Robert and Lily officially moved in, my mother changed completely. She was no longer the woman who held me during nightmares, or the one who left notes in my lunchbox saying, "You're my sunshine." She became a stranger. Overly sweet to Lily, doting on Robert like he was some treasure she stumbled upon. And me? I became an old item in the closet no one bothered to dust off. I wasn't allowed to watch movies with them anymore. "Lily needs peace to sleep early," Mom said, pushing me off the couch. Dinners, once warm family time, turned into Lily's performance hour. She'd tell silly stories, mispronounce words, and everyone laughed like it was the funniest joke of the century. I just stared at my plate, quietly eating. Every time I tried to speak, Robert would cut me off with a dagger-sharp glare. "Don't you see Lily's talking, Sophia? Don't interrupt." I'd look at my mom. She said nothing, just kept piling food on Lily's plate, smiling without a hint of warmth in her eyes. I began to be excluded from the smallest things. The bathroom I used was now for Lily, because she's still little. My personal items were dumped into a cardboard box and left in the hallway. My coat was squeezed into a closet once empty after Dad's passing, now filled with Robert's suits, hats, and leather shoes. I learned to stay quiet, because every time I spoke, I earned another invisible wound. Robert always found a reason to belittle me. One time I accidentally dropped a glass while clearing the table. He stood up, slammed his hand down so hard the plates shook. Unbelievable. A kid your age can't even hold a glass? You think water glasses grow on trees? I whispered an apology, hands trembling as I grabbed a towel. But he wasn't done. You live in my house, eat my food, use my electricity, and this is how you repay me? Pathetic. I bit my lip so hard it bled. I knew if I talked back, he'd turn to my mom with the usual line. Your daughter is so ungrateful. And as always, she'd nod. Or worse, stay silent. My very existence annoyed them. Then one day someone else entered our house. Eleanor, Robert's mother. A skinny woman with a face that looked like she smelled something rotten all the time. From the moment she saw me, she frowned. This is the girl. Doesn't look like anything special. No wonder she's always causing problems. I froze in the hallway. She walked around me like she was inspecting damaged goods. Hair unbrushed, wrinkled shirt, hunched back. No wonder no one could ever love her. I wanted to scream at her, but instead, I clenched my fists until my nails broke the skin. From then on, Eleanor haunted the house. Once, while I was reading on the couch, she walked by and tapped my knee with her cane. Sit like that and you'll ruin your spine. What kind of girl sits like a boy? One time, she slapped me lightly across the face because I ate too slowly and ruined the mealtime rhythm. A small slap, but enough to leave a handprint. I told my mother. She looked at me, her eyes distant like she was listening to the morning news. She's old now, Sophia. Don't make a big deal out of it. Can't you just let it go? In that moment I understood one thing clearly. In my mother's eyes, I was no longer her daughter. I was just an obstacle. Lily, on the other hand, was praised like an angel. One of her messy drawings was stuck on the fridge, framed on the wall, even printed onto her birthday invitations. I turned in an exam and got an A. No one even asked. She spilled milk on the carpet and my mom laughed, saying, "She's just growing up." I spilled water. And Robert yelled like thunder, and my mom called a carpet cleaner within 5 minutes. Once, I accidentally broke Lily's favorite pencil. She cried like I had just killed her pet. "She's jealous of you," Robert said. "Of course," Eleanor chimed in, overshadowed by a smarter, prettier, better-behaved little sister. Classic bitter big sister. I lifted my head and looked straight at them. "I'm not jealous, I just wish someone would treat me like a human being." No one answered. My mom stood behind the table, drawing dishes, her hands trembling slightly, but she didn't turn around. That house used to be my home, now it was just a stage where I played the background role, no lines, no spotlight, just there so others could shine. I don't remember the exact moment I decided to become independent. Maybe it didn't come in one big realization. Maybe it was the build-up of every sharp glare from Robert, every mocking word from Eleanor, every time my mother walked past me like I was furniture. But one morning in March, on my 16th birthday, I looked in the mirror and saw a skinny girl with dark circles under her eyes. And I whispered to myself, "You can't live like this forever." That afternoon, while Robert drove Lily to art class, I quietly typed and printed flyers. Sophia. Dog walking, babysitting, odd jobs. Honest, punctual, loves animals. I walked around the neighborhood, house by house, door by door, knocking and smiling as hard as I could. Mrs. Mildred, the elderly widow at the end of the street, peeked through the door and asked, "You're the girl who got yelled at the other day for spilling water on the sidewalk, right?" I blushed and nodded. She flung the door open. "Good. People who admit mistakes are the ones who learn. My Max needs a walk every afternoon. $10 each time, deal." Max was an old chuppy dog, heavy as a boulder. But I loved him from the first walk. He didn't judge me for my worn-out clothes, or frown when I collapsed onto a bench out of breath. He just licked my hand and softly whined like he was saying, "You're okay." After Max, I got Pepper, the hyper little dog from the Martinez family. Then I was asked to babysit the Jenkins twins on Saturday nights. On weekends, I helped Mr. Benson, the blind elderly man, organize his closet and read his letters. I did everything, I turned nothing down. At night, while Robert's family watched movies and laughed loudly, I sat in my room, counting cash and writing notes in my old blue notebook. I saved every cent. No snacks, no new clothes, no birthday parties, just one goal: to buy a phone. One of my own. Truly mine. 3 months later, I had $187. Just enough to buy a discounted older model phone at Best Buy. I walked to the store, heart floating. When I held it in my hands, I couldn't stop smiling. That night, I sat on my bed, plugged it in, downloaded study apps, set alarms. Every beep from the phone felt like confirmation. I had done it. No one could call me a freeloader anymore. I was setting the ringtone when Lily barged in, like always, without knocking. "What's that?" Her eyes widened. "My new phone," I said, trying to stay calm. "I want it." I gave a cold smile. "No, I bought it with money I earned." She ran downstairs screaming like she'd just been attacked. "Dad, Sophia has a new phone, I want it too." I had barely stepped out of my room when Robert stormed up the stairs, eyes blazing red. "Who do you think you are, buying stuff without asking?" "I used money I earned." "What money? You live under my roof, use my electricity, eat my food. You don't own anything here." Before I could react, he ripped the phone from my hands and turned to Lily, voice suddenly sweet. "Here you go, princess." I stood frozen. "That was mine," my voice cracked. Robert turned back, face inches from mine. "I just told you, nothing here is yours. You're just extra baggage." My mom stood on the stairs, arms crossed, witnessing it all. Not a word. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't have any tears left. The next morning at school, my English teacher, S. Harper, saw me slumped over my desk in the back. "Sophia, are you okay?" I meant to shake my head, but my lips spoke first. "They took my phone. I bought it with money I earned, but they don't think I deserve it." She sat beside me. "Who's they, Sophia?" And I told her everything. For the first time in years, I told everything. About my dad, about Robert, about Lily, about my mom, about the slaps, the insults, and the phone stolen right out of my hands. That afternoon, I was called to the principal's office. And my mom was called in too. I wasn't in the room during their talk, but when my mother came out, her face was tight as a wire. She handed me the phone, without a word, and walked away before I could even react. That night, Lily cried for an hour about losing her phone. My mother banged on my door, voice low and bitter. "Proud of yourself? Humiliating the whole family over a cheap toy, you really are a traitor." I lay on the bed, holding the phone. Feeling no joy. Only ashes. The tiny bit of happiness I had tried to build was once again crushed by the very people who were supposed to protect me. But in that moment, I knew I had to get out. Not because of a phone, but because I deserved a life of my own. I remember the day I received the scholarship letter so clearly. It was raining, and I had just run home from my part-time job, soaked to the bone, mud splattered up the cuffs of my jeans. A thick envelope sat in the mailbox, bearing the official seal of St. Helena University. I ran up to my room, heart pounding like a drum. My hands shook so badly it took me a few minutes just to open it, and when I read the words, "We are pleased to inform you that you have been awarded a full scholarship," I broke down crying, not out of surprise, but because for the first time in years, I was certain I would be free of this place. That night, I waited until everyone was gathered at the dinner table. Dinner was Lily's favorite, baked pasta. Mom had even lit candles like it was a special occasion. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm. "I have some good news to share." Robert put down his knife, looking up with an annoyed expression. "What now?" "I got accepted into St. Helena University. With a full scholarship. No one said anything for a few seconds. Then Lily burst into laughter like I had just told a bad joke. Robert scoffed. You applied to college without asking me? I did everything on my own. Mom knew I applied. I'm not asking anyone for money. The scholarship covers tuition and housing. And you think you can just leave this house like some ungrateful brat? I swallowed hard. I'm not running away. This is a life-changing opportunity. I just want. You want what? You live in my house, eat my food, and you think you have a right to decide anything? His voice was so loud that Lily flinched and knocked over her water glass. I looked to my mother, hoping she would say something. Next to her, a piece of bread sat crushed in her hand, her eyes fixed on her plate. Mom, I whispered. She looked up, her gaze cold as ice. You've never respected this family. You're always trying to ruin our lives. Family? I nearly screamed. I get called a freeloader every day. I get everything I've worked for taken away. I've done everything just to survive here. And now that I have a real chance, you... Smack. The sound echoed like a gunshot. My cheek burned. My mother's hand was still raised. Lily's mouth was wide open. Robert laughed. Like he'd just watched the best scene in a movie. You dare raise your voice at your mother? Fine, Sophia, get out of my house. Right now. I froze. What? You heard me, my mom hissed, her voice like a snake. Take your things and leave. I stood up, my cheek burning, my heart crushed. I ran to my room, threw my backpack on the bed and shoved in a few sets of clothes, my notebook, school documents, and the phone I had fought so hard to keep. I didn't have time to think. Just the urge to leave immediately. As I came down the stairs, Lily was coloring like nothing happened. Robert flipped on the TV like he had just completed a chore. And my mom? She stared at the screen without even glancing in my direction. I opened the door. The night wind hit my face, carrying the chill of a spring that hadn't quite arrived. I stood there for a few seconds, hand clenched around my backpack strap. No one saw me off. No one called me back. I stepped out and closed the door behind me, with all the pieces of my heart I had left. I didn't know where I was going. Everything blurred under the streetlights. My legs kept walking, my eyes kept watering. I had no close relatives, no best friend to turn to. But then I remembered Maya, my lab partner in biology. The one who once lent me her book when I forgot mine. The only person at school who ever asked, "Are you okay?" and actually waited for an answer. I followed the address Maya had written on a study group flyer. My eyes were swollen, my throat dry as I rang the doorbell around 10 o'clock at night. The door swung open. Sophia? Maya looked shocked. What? What happened? I couldn't answer, I just sobbed. I don't have anywhere to go. Maya pulled me inside without asking another question. She brought me to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and called her aunt. Miss Serena. Miss Serena was a woman with brown skin, tight cornrow braids, and eyes sharp enough to read your thoughts. When Maya whispered what happened, she simply said, "You need a place to stay, right? There's space above the garage. It's got a bed, a bathroom, and the kitchen still has some cold pizza." I stood frozen. Really? I don't joke about helping people, sweetheart. That night, I slept in the tiny loft above the garage. The bed was a bit saggy, the smell of fresh paint still lingered, and a chubby cat snoozed at my feet. But I had never felt safer. The next morning, when I woke up, my phone buzzed with a message. An unknown number. I opened it. "Mom, come home now, stop being dramatic." I turned off my phone. There was no home anymore. I never imagined a small Italian restaurant on the corner of Franklin Street could save my life. But somehow, it did what my mother never could. It saw me. 3 days after I moved into Aunt Serena's loft, I still didn't know how I'd survive. Each morning I woke up staring at the ceiling dotted with old paint stains and wondered, am I strong enough to keep going? I still went to school, tried to act normal, but every night I curled up with fear gnawing at me. Tuition, living expenses, the future. That evening after school, I sat silently in the kitchen, staring into a glass of water. Aunt Serena walked in, her hair smelling of fabric softener, carrying a paper bag and 2 plates of steaming spaghetti. She set one down in front of me, then put her hands on her hips. "Hungry?" I nodded. But I still stayed quiet. Aunt looked at me for a moment, then sighed. "Maya told me everything, about your mother, that man, all of it. You don't have to repeat it." She poured more water. "But listen, Sophia, life is a fight. You've already fought. Now it's time to learn how to stand on your own." I gave a sad smile. "I want to, I just don't know where to start. I have no money and college is coming up." She nodded. "I have a friend. Her name's Clarissa. She manages an Italian restaurant downtown. They're looking for help. I can put in a word. It's not easy work, but if you're willing, that place could be your start." I nearly jumped up. "I'm ready. I'll do anything, as long as I can stand on my own 2 feet." On Saturday morning, Aunt took me to a restaurant called La Fiora. A cozy red brick building with a hand-carved wooden sign, like a little corner of Europe in the middle of Oregon. The smell of garlic butter and tomato sauce hugged my nose the moment I stepped inside. Clarissa, a petite woman in her 50s with sharp eyes, stepped out of the kitchen, still wearing a flour-dusted apron. "You're Sophia?" "Yes, ma'am." "Serena says you're a hard worker." "Good. We don't have space for lazy people. Clear tables, wipe counters. Learn how to carry a tray. Do well, and maybe there's an apprenticeship in it for you. Do poorly, and don't come back tomorrow." I nodded so hard it nearly hurt my neck. My first shift started that afternoon. I wiped tables, washed glasses, took orders, and nearly messed everything up. I spilled water into a guest's shoe, delivered the wrong dish to the wrong table, and dropped a tray once. But Clarissa didn't fire me. She just frowned, patted my shoulder, and said, "Next time hold the tray with your left hand. Better balance. And don't run. You slip, you're done." After the shift, I collapsed on the steps behind the kitchen, my back soaked in sweat, legs completely numb. Clarissa handed me a lemonade and sat beside me, sighing. "The first day is always hell. But if you're still sitting here instead of running away, it means you've got guts. And you'll need guts in this business." I laughed for the first time in weeks, a small laugh but a real one. A week later, Clarissa called me upstairs, to the 2nd floor where there was a small attic apartment. "The previous owner used to live here, it's empty now, not spacious, but there's a bed, a small kitchen and a window that overlooks the street. If you need a place, Serena's on board." I could barely believe my ears. I can really stay here? As long as you show up on time, and don't turn it into a pigsty." I thanked her over and over. When I stepped into that little space, with its sloped ceiling, bare brick walls and small square window, I felt like I had entered a new world. This was my space. No one to yell at me through a door, no one to snatch things from my hands. Just me, the light, and the soft hum of traffic below. The months that followed passed like pages of an unfinished book. I learned everything from Clarissa: how to check inventory, manage schedules, track reservations, work with suppliers. I took notes, learned every task like a child learning to speak. Clarissa was strict but fair. When I did well, she gave a small nod. When I messed up, she made me fix it immediately. No shouting, no humiliation. And most importantly, she believed in me. Aunt Serena visited regularly, bringing food or asking about school. Maya, somehow, became my best friend. We studied together, worked side by side, and laughed about everything. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere. I haven't forgotten what my mother and Robert did, but I no longer let it consume me every night. I was busy. Busy living, busy learning, busy building something they could never take from me. My own future. There's a strange feeling that comes with walking into a restaurant where you once wiped tables, then sitting in the manager's office, looking at a fully booked reservation list, and knowing your fingerprint is on every brick. I, Sophia Reynolds, 24 years old, am now the co-owner of the La Fiora restaurant chain, alongside Maya, the friend who once opened her kitchen door to me on a rainy night. From a nervous server, I now sign off on employee paychecks, negotiate with wine suppliers, and approve special menus for private events worth thousands of dollars. The journey here wasn't easy. But there's nothing I'd change. After living in the attic for 3 years of college, I graduated with a degree in hospitality business management. There was no party, no family applause, but I wore an old cap and gown and stood in the school courtyard with Maya, who was studying menu and food photography design. We laughed together, no fireworks, no cameras, just a shared look that said, "We're going to build something big." And we did. Clarissa, my blunt, no-nonsense mentor in the restaurant world, announced her retirement after 25 years running La Fiora. That day, she called us up to the office and pulled a stack of papers from her drawer. "What would you two think about running this place together?" she said, eyes never leaving the contract. I looked at Maya, then back at Clarissa. We'd have to double our effort. Then double it, but do it right. We bought Clarissa's shares using all of my savings, plus a small loan from a support fund for young women entrepreneurs. Maya handled brand and visual design, from tablecloth colors to the food photography concepts. I handled operations, systems, hiring, accounting, and customer complaints about dishes that didn't taste like last year. After 6 months, revenue increased by 1.5 times. We opened a second location in a busy corner of Beaverton, then a third in Salem, and recently a fourth in the art district of Eugene, where young crowds flock every weekend to experience our modern twist on Italian cuisine. Each location carries its own vibe, but all keep La Fiora's soul: honest, heartfelt, and unpretentious. No silk tablecloths or crystal glasses, just pasta, made with real love, and staff who know regulars by name. I remember once, a businesswoman from California dined with us. I was clearing dishes myself to help the team when she asked, "Are you the manager here?" I replied, "Not just the manager, I'm also the owner." She nodded slowly, smiling. "I could tell from the way you walked into the kitchen, from how you looked at your staff, this isn't just a restaurant. This is your child." I smiled. I didn't deny it. We didn't just expand the space, we spread our values. Maya leads a mentoring program for culinary students. I provide in-house training for young employees who want to grow in the industry. We take interns from local schools and host workshops for aspiring young chefs. And at every location I've set aside a small corner, with a photo of Clarissa and the words, "The first person who taught me to believe in myself." I'll never forget the one who gave me a second chance. One Monday morning, while I was reviewing shipment schedules, Maya walked into the office, holding a copy of Northwest Culinary Voice, a leading culinary magazine in the Pacific Northwest. Guess who just made it into the top 10 fastest-growing independent restaurant chains? I raised an eyebrow. "Please don't say La Fiora, because my heart won't be able to take it." Maya flashed a radiant smile. "La, Fi, O, Ra." I sat in stunned silence. Just for a second. Then stood up and grabbed her hand. "We did it! And we're just getting started." We used to fall asleep on our laptops after messing up payroll. We once cried together in the walk-in freezer after a supplier canceled a delivery last minute. But every time I saw a customer walk in, smile, and say their favorite dish still tasted just right, I knew it was all worth it. I didn't need to be honored anywhere. I didn't need applause or admiration. I just needed to walk into my restaurant, hear the clinking of silverware, smell the rich aroma of sauces, and know in my heart, I got here on my own 2 feet. No one gave me this life. I claimed it. Some moments, thought long buried by time, suddenly surfaced like a cold blade slicing through healed skin. For me, that moment came on a Saturday evening at our downtown Portland La Fiora location. I was heading downstairs to the private event room, wearing my usual professional smile and holding the printed special menu. The engagement party had been booked 3 weeks in advance via email. No familiar names, no red flags. All I knew was there would be 48 guests, a cozy atmosphere with candlelight, and a 3-tier tiramisu cake. The restaurant was bustling. Glass chandeliers reflected light into wine glasses, the gentle clinks of spoons against porcelain forming a soft symphony. "Sophia, they're here," Maya said as she stepped into the office, her expression strange. "You might want to come down and see for yourself." I frowned. "Is there a problem?" "You'll understand when you get there." I slipped on my black blazer with the La Fiora badge pinned on the chest, a symbol of my role, co-founder. I took a deep breath as I descended the wooden staircase, just as I had done countless times before. But nothing could have prepared me for what I saw in that banquet room. My mother, Robert, and Sarah. I froze, blood rushing to my face. There was no mistaking them. My mom still had the same hairstyle, soft blonde curls, cream cashmere sweater. Robert looked heavier, his receding hairline even more pronounced. Sarah wore a glittery dress, her hand flashing with a sparkling engagement ring. Beside her stood a young man in an Armani suit. Sarah's engagement party. My mother had just raised her glass when her eyes landed on me. I wasn't sure she recognized me right away. But when her gaze dropped to the name badge, "Sophia, manager, La Fiora," she stiffened. And then, she laughed. A mocking laugh, loud enough to turn heads. "Oh, look who it is, our little waitress." Sarah turned and recognized me immediately. She shrieked with laughter. "Unbelievable, my sister, the one who ran away crying, is now serving food." I didn't say a word. I just stood tall, one hand gently resting on the menu folder. The room's attention began to shift toward me. Robert stood, wobbling as if he'd had too much to drink. "Still waiting tables, huh? 10 years later and no progress. I bet you still don't know how to hold a glass properly." Sarah giggled, snuggling up to her fiancé. "Let's hope she doesn't spill sauce on my wedding dress tonight." I clenched my teeth. Every cell in my body screamed to respond, to shout the truth. But before I could say anything, a clear, firm voice rose behind me. "According to our service contract, any guest who insults or harms staff or management will be asked to leave immediately." I turned. Maya stood there, holding a leather-bound contract folder with La Fiora's gold-embossed logo. My mother scowled. "And who are you to say that?" Maya smiled, sharp as a blade. "I'm the co-owner of this place." My mother froze. But I still hadn't spoken. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted them to hear it from me. I stepped forward. "And I am Sophia Reynolds, co-founder of the La Fiora restaurant chain, currently with 4 locations across the state of Oregon, including the one you're standing in." The room fell silent. Somewhere, a spoon dropped onto a plate. Robert's face turned red, almost about to explode. "Don't make things up, you're nothing but." I pulled out my phone, tapped a few times. A video started playing, footage of me giving a speech at the grand opening of La Fiora's 4th location, shaking hands with the mayor. My face, my name, the words I had written myself. Sarah grabbed her fiancé's phone, frantically searching. Then, she stammered. "On Google, it really is Sophia Reynolds." My mother's hand trembled, spilling her wine. She still wouldn't look at me. Her eyes locked onto the photo hanging on the wall. Me standing beside Clarissa, my mentor. With the words beneath, "From invisible child to founder." Robert slammed his hand on the table. "You think you're better than us? You're just a fatherless brat who got kicked out for being disrespectful." I looked at him, my gaze steady, no longer afraid. "No, Robert, I was thrown out for daring to live honestly, for standing up after being trampled, and now I stand here as the owner. Your guests, and you just insulted a staff member, who also happens to be a co-owner. So..." I turned to the staff. "Please clear this table, this engagement party is over." The room erupted in murmurs. Guests whispered, Sarah cried, Robert shouted in protest. My mother sat frozen like stone. But me? I felt at peace. Because after all these years, I finally had the right to say, I'm no longer the shadow in your house. I am my own person. And I don't belong to you anymore. Robert stood, his face flushed with rage, or shame, I couldn't tell. He stumbled, holding a wineglass, then suddenly grabbed a salad plate and hurled it at me. Everything happened in a flash. A sharp pain across my left cheek. I felt dressing on my skin, lettuce tangled in my hair. Gasps filled the room, phones quickly came out. I raised a hand to my face, tasting blood at the edge of my lip. No apology, no remorseful glance. Robert stood there, panting, screaming like a madman. I raised you for years and now you come back here to humiliate me? You think running a damn restaurant makes you special? You're still that pathetic little leech. Maya stepped in immediately, her eyes like steel. You've crossed the line, that was physical assault, and the restaurant has the entire incident on video. I turned to the security team. Lock all camera feeds, pull the last 30 minutes, send them to our internal server. Across the room, Sarah sobbed, covering her face like she was the victim. Her fiancé, now pale as a ghost, quietly pulled out his phone to call a cab. My mother sat still, her confused eyes scanning the room. When I looked at her, she still wouldn't meet my gaze, just like 10 years ago. But this time, I didn't beg her to speak. I stood tall, blood trickling lightly down the collar of my shirt. Please assist the guests at this table in leaving the restaurant. As stated in the contract, any disruptive or violent behavior results in immediate cancellation of the event, without refund. Another staff member stepped forward. Security is on the way, Miss Sophia. I nodded. Thank you. Everything that followed felt like a slow-motion reel. Robert was restrained by 2 security guards while Sarah screamed at our mother to do something. Eleanor, still alive and still as vicious as ever, clung to her pasta plate like it was treasure, screeching, "You lunatic, you have no right to kick me out of my granddaughter's party." A server tried to gently take the plate and she shrieked. "Thief! You're robbing me?" He hit me, "Call the police." "Already done, ma'am," Maya replied calmly, her voice steady. Some guests started recording. One captured Robert being escorted out of the restaurant, still cursing through slurred speech. Another filmed Sarah collapsing into a chair, clutching her head, mascara smeared like something out of a horror film. 30 minutes later, the police arrived. I stood silently as one of the officers asked, "Who's the victim here?" I raised my hand. "Me, Sophia Reynolds, co-owner of this establishment." That man threw a plate at my face. There is video footage and multiple witnesses. Robert was handcuffed and taken away, still shouting drunken insults. Sarah tried to follow but was stopped at the door. None of them, not a single one, looked back at me. The next morning my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. First, Maya sent over the security footage, high quality, full audio, capturing the entire exchange, the assault, and my response. Then came a wave of videos from guests, uploaded to TikTok, Facebook and Reddit. Within 12 hours, the hashtags, engagement gone wrong, and pasta salt were trending across Portland. A clip of Eleanor screaming about her pasta plate went viral as a meme, "When your dignity is pasta-shaped." I opened my email, hundreds of messages from strangers. One read, "I was abused by my stepmother too, thank you for standing up. You're an inspiration." I've never dared speak back before. But now I'm rethinking everything. On professional forums, I was being praised as a resilient woman and a composed leader in the face of public provocation. Meanwhile, my former family unraveled. Robert was suspended from his job for behavior unbecoming of a company representative. Sarah lost her wedding venue contract. The venue wanted nothing to do with a publicly violent event. My mother said nothing. No comments. No message. No apology. I kept the video public. Not for revenge, but as a reminder to myself of the person I used to be and the woman I've become. I'm no longer the girl they called a freeloader. I am Sophia Reynolds. I rose from the insults, the blood on my cheek, and the shattered salad plate at my feet. I don't need their forgiveness. I just need freedom from them. Sophia's story is a testament to the strength of resilience and self-respect. Hurt, dismissed and abandoned by her own family, she did not collapse, she rose. She built success with nothing but grit and purpose. Despite being trampled, Sophia didn't fight back with hatred, but with maturity, courage and self-worth. She proved that sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't a comeback line, it's a life so brilliant, they never even imagined it. What do you think of Sophia's decision? Should she ever forgive her family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, real-life stories about family, courage, and redemption. My name is Clara. I'm 27 years old. 4 months ago, I was still living in a mansion of over 13,000 square feet in the suburbs of Nashville. The place I thought would be my forever home. But then my parents, Mr. Dennis and Mrs. Lorraine, along with my sister Brooke, took everything from me. Not just the house, not just the company, but the last ounce of trust I had left for my family. My grandfather, Mr. Harold Lexley, was the only one who truly saw me. He was the man who built Lexington Timber Group, the largest lumber company in Tennessee, from nothing. I was the granddaughter he taught to read financial statements at 14, the one he brought to shareholder meetings to build backbone. On the other hand, Brooke, 30 years old, beautiful, glamorous, never showed interest in anything beyond her platinum credit card and a shallow social circle in Dallas. But in my parents' eyes, she was always the perfect daughter. They didn't even try to hide their favoritism. Every time Brooke messed up, a broken contract, credit card debt, gambling rumors, they'd blame social pressure and pour money into cleaning up the mess. And me? I once helped the company land a deal worth $2.8 million and only got a half-hearted nod from my father. Not bad. Grandpa Harold passed away earlier this year after 6 months battling cancer. In his final days, he never left his bed. And I, as usual, was the one brewing his morning coffee, taking down every instruction, every matter he wanted to settle. After I'm gone, you'll see who they really are, he told me one rainy afternoon, his eyes dim but his voice steady. But you won't walk away empty-handed. I didn't think much of it until the reading of the will. The meeting was held at the office of attorney Samuel Whitaker, my grandfather's legal representative for nearly 2 decades. I arrived 10 minutes early, not wanting to see Brooke's fake face. When Mr. Whitaker began to read, the air in the room turned to stone. According to the wishes of Mr. Harold Denton, all executive shares of Lexington Timber Group and ownership of the Bell River estate will be transferred to his granddaughter, Clara Denton. I heard a wineglass clatter against the table. My mother, Lorraine, gripped the armrest, her face pale. My father said nothing, but his jaw tightened, as if he could crush the air itself. Brooke burst into tears. But it wasn't grief, it was rage! She jumped to her feet, screaming. What? He left everything to her? What did she even do? Make coffee and jot down notes a few times and suddenly she gets the whole company? My father finally spoke, his voice chillingly calm. I think we need to reassess the legal validity of this document. I wasn't surprised. But I wasn't ready for the scale of betrayal that followed. 3 weeks later, I was thrown out of the very house my grandfather left me. They hired a separate lawyer, submitted a bundle of medical evaluations to court, claiming Grandpa Harold was no longer mentally sound when revising the will. I objected. I presented the evaluation from his personal doctor, confirming he was lucid until the end. No one listened. One Monday morning while I was having breakfast in the kitchen, Peterson, the longtime house manager, approached me and whispered, "They want you out of the house by noon, Miss Clara." I laughed. They can't do that, this is my house. But I was wrong. At exactly 11:45 a.m., my father walked into my room without knocking. Behind him was Brooke, smiling triumphantly, and 2 strange men in gray suits. "Get up," he said, "your sister needs this room." I didn't move. And then, without warning, he grabbed my arm, yanked me out of the chair, and dragged me down the hallway with a strength I never imagined he had. Brooke stood by, unblinking. My mother opened the front door, silent. My suitcase, the only one I had time to pack, was thrown onto the stone steps. I slipped, hit my head on the edge. Blood, trickling down my forehead. My father spoke like he was wrapping up a board meeting. "You have no rights here anymore. All assets are under review. Leave before I call the police." I stood up. Blood and tears mixed. I sat curled up at the bus stop nearly a mile from the estate. My coat was soaked, my hair tangled, my hands bruised from resisting my father's shove. No one stopped. No one offered to call a cab. In a wealthy neighborhood like Riverstone Hollow, people don't help someone who looks like they've just been thrown out of a house, even if that person is a Denton daughter. I turned on my phone. My bank account had less than $200 left. All my credit cards were supplementary, under my mother's name, and it looked like they'd been canceled that very morning. I texted the only person I trusted, Jenna, my high school friend, now a nurse at a clinic in East Nashville. "I just got kicked out. I need a place to crash for a few days. I'm serious. I'm not joking." 10 minutes later she arrived. She didn't ask questions, just unlocked the car and let me sit in silence. She waited until I spoke first, then gently asked, "What did they do to you?" I answered slowly, like each word was pulling loose a part of me. My dad pulled my hair, my mom watched, and Brooke just smiled. I always thought my family was cold, but I never imagined they'd treat me like a stranger. Like something to be discarded. Jenna didn't ask anything else. She took me to her 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a modest but cozy complex. I slept almost 12 hours straight, only waking once in the night to the wind whistling through the window and a familiar nightmare. Brooke's mocking laugh, and my mother's contemptuous stare. Looking back, everything had been programmed from the start. When I was little, I once asked my mom why only Brooke got to take ballet lessons while I had to go to math tutoring. She chuckled softly and said, "Because your brain works with numbers. Brooke, she needs softer things." I didn't know what softer meant, because even after Brooke quit 3 dance classes and dropped out of 2 piano courses, my mom still called her full of potential. Me, I won a statewide math competition in 9th grade, and my dad just said, "Don't all students do well in math?" When I got to college I received a full scholarship from Northwestern, but my mom would whisper to her friends that I probably got it for being a woman in a dry field. Meanwhile, Brooke attended a private school in Florida, changed majors 4 times, and was even suspended for cheating. But my parents still threw her a party every time she decided to start fresh. Even in the smallest things, the difference was always there. On my 18th birthday, I got a leather wallet and a card that read, "Good luck in college." On Brooke's birthday, a brand new Jeep and a luxury hotel party. My mother even hired a photographer for family portraits. I wasn't invited. Grandpa Harold was the only one who never made me feel extra. He told me I was the only one in the family who knew how to listen, challenge, and ask why, instead of just nodding. Every weekend I came home, he'd spend hours reading a chapter of a business strategy book with me, or reviewing the company's balance sheets. "You've got a mind for leadership," he told me when I was 19, the first time I went with him to an economic conference in Atlanta. "And Brooke's got a mind? For picking out Gucci shoes." He meant it as a joke, but now I realize it was brutally true. My parents knew he spent more time with me. They didn't like it, but they didn't dare interfere. Not until he got sick. After Grandpa Harold was diagnosed with cancer, Brooke started showing up at the estate more often. She wore pale-colored clothes, always had a soft scarf, and acted mournful like she was his closest companion. But I knew she was playing a part. Because after each 10-minute visit to his room, she'd come out, scroll through her phone, and ask the chef, "Is there anything that's not so bland? I'm tired of all this diet food." During Grandpa's final days, I stayed almost non-stop. He held my hand and whispered, "Don't trust what's written on paper. They can rewrite everything, but they can't erase the memory of those who truly saw it." I didn't understand what he meant at the time. But now, after being dragged out of my home by my own father like I was a stranger, I know he had already seen it all coming. And I've also begun to understand why all these years I was never allowed to win. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because they never wanted me to exist as an heir. The morning of the third Tuesday after I was thrown out of the estate, Jenna left a cup of coffee and a hastily scribbled note on the kitchen counter. "Morning shift, milk's in the fridge, I left the spare key on the shelf." I quietly sent a thank you text, then walked back into the room, where I'd shoved everything I had left into one corner after the expulsion. A torn suitcase, 2 sets of clothes, a pair of muddy shoes, and one final object that made me collapse to the floor the moment I saw it. A gold pocket watch. I'd stuffed it into my coat pocket in the chaos of leaving. At the time, I'd only thought of it as something Grandpa Harold had cherished, something to hold on to. But now, holding it in my hand, something felt off. The back of the watch was slightly loose, as if it had once been opened and shut carelessly. I held it closer to the light. There was a faint groove, almost invisible unless viewed from an angle. I grabbed a small sewing kit knife Jenna kept and gently traced along the seam. A soft click. The back panel slid aside, revealing a hidden compartment. My heart thudded. A small black USB drive, no bigger than a pinky tip, taped neatly inside. Alongside it, a folded slip of paper. The handwriting was unmistakable. Grandpa's. "Clara, if you're reading this, the worst has happened. They betrayed you. But you won't fight alone. Find Mr. Richard, his number and address are on the back. He'll know what to do." My hand shook as I peeled the tape off the USB, laid it gently on the table, then flipped over the note. The address was in northern Franklin, about a 40-minute drive from Nashville, with a handwritten landline number, 61584233382. I didn't know what I was hoping for, but I knew one thing. If Grandpa Harold left a USB and named someone called Richard, it wasn't random. I called. 3 rings. Then an older man's voice, steady and measured. "This is Richard." I swallowed hard. "Are you Richard Bennett?" "I'm Clara Denton. Harold's granddaughter." Silence. A few seconds. Then, "So, you found the watch, huh?" I froze. "What do you mean?" "Harold said you were smart and tough, but he wasn't sure if you'd have the nerve to open the back." I gripped the phone, my voice low. "I didn't really have a choice, they took everything." A deep sigh. "I know. Get in the car, meet me at the address, bring the USB, and tell no one." The house was a restored farmhouse in the middle of an open oak field. No name on the gate, no security cameras, just a brass bell hanging on a wooden frame. I rang. A man in his 60s, silver hair, wearing a checkered shirt and khakis, opened the door. "Clara?" He nodded. "Come in." He led me down a long hallway, into a modest but warm living room. There, a laptop was already open, USB slot ready. I handed him the drive. He plugged it in. Several folders popped up. Medical records, recordings, will_backup, bank info, confidential. The screen brightened. Without a word, Richard clicked a video file. Grandpa Harold appeared. Thinner, nearly all gray, but with sharp eyes, and a steady voice. "If someone other than Clara is watching this, know that violating my will is a criminal act. Clara is the sole rightful heir to Lexington Timber Group." My fingers clenched around the chair. My pulse raced. Richard turned to me. "This drive has everything. The original will Harold signed in front of 3 neutral witnesses. A mental health assessment from his private doctor confirming he was fully competent. And hours of audio recordings Harold secretly made, including ones where your parents and Brooke discussed adjusting the documents. My mouth opened, but no words came. That's not all, he continued. There's also data on 3 offshore accounts, each with nearly $500,000. All authorized under your name. Harold called it the survival fund. I staggered back, stunned. Where would he go this far? Because he knew they were never going to let you win. I stared at the screen. Grandpa's image frozen in that final frame, looking straight at me. Clara, if you're watching this, then fight. And don't go soft. I took a long, trembling breath. If this was what he left behind, then I wasn't letting it go to waste. 3 days after the meeting with Mr. Richard, I returned to Nashville in silence. My hand gripped the USB stick, like it was the only weapon I had left. I couldn't go public with anything, yet. Every step had to be calculated. Mr. Richard had emphasized that. Don't strike when you're cornered, strike when they least expect it. I rented a small room near the Hermitage Industrial Zone, where no one had heard the Denton name. There, under the yellow glow of a desk lamp, I combed through every folder on the USB, like peeling back the layers of masks my family had worn for years. One audio file stopped me cold. My father's voice. Cold, sharp, speaking on the phone to someone. As long as the doctor signs off that he's mentally unfit, Gregory will handle the rest. Gregory. They had even pulled the family's private lawyer into this dirty game. In another clip, Brooke giggled. If Clara ever found out about those offshore accounts, she'd probably pass out. They knew. They knew Grandpa had prepared, and they were a step ahead. I opened a new email account and sent digital copies of the documents to one person. Benjamin Stokes, a retired inheritance attorney and former law school friend of Mr. Richard. He still took on special cases. We had an appointment next week. But before going any further, I had to be sure. Was there anything else hidden in Grandpa's house? I needed to go back to Bell River Estate. That Friday evening, I drove up the long road to the Denton property. The black iron gate had a new code, new cameras. I didn't go in. I waited. And just as I'd predicted, the family's black SUV rolled out around 7 p.m. Dinner out every weekend, an old tradition, kept more for show than love. I slipped through the back fence, where Grandpa once secretly showed me when I was 15. Just in case you lose your keys and don't want to explain it to anyone. The west cellar door was just as I remembered. No one remembered it existed, tucked away in the old wine storage building Grandpa used. I stepped in. Didn't turn on the lights. Just used my phone's flashlight. And I realized I was too late. Grandpa's study had been stripped. Shelves empty, desk drawers pulled out. The safe door left wide open, fresh dust still scattered. Someone had searched for something. Recently. I was about to leave when my eyes stopped on a picture frame face down. I picked it up. Behind it, taped to the back panel of wood, was a thin envelope marked, "Clara, if everything's gone." Hands trembling, I opened it. A second original copy of the will, notarized and signed by Grandpa and 2 independent witnesses. And a letter. Clara, they may erase everything in this room, but they can't erase you from the truth. That night, as I left the property, a text came in. From my mother's number. We know where you are. If you trespass again, don't blame us for your ruined reputation. I laughed out loud. Reputation? They kicked me out, changed the gate codes, and still had the nerve to say I was unstable. Last week, they sent a legal letter from the family's law firm, claiming Grandpa had shown serious signs of delusion near the end, and that any mention of Clara taking over the company was purely imagined. I tried calling the Lexington Timber Group general line the next day. The receptionist's voice was icy. There is no Clara Denton listed in our staff or board of directors. Please contact legal. I'd been erased. Not just from the house, but from the very system I was born into. Then came the final blow. Jenna, the woman who had taken me in, was called into her building's management office. There's been a complaint from the landlord. They want to review the lease terms. We're sorry, but you can't have guests for over 10 days. I understood. They found out where I was. They pressured Jenna. Not with threats, but with policies. With invisible power. I packed my things, hugged Jenna tight, thanked her for standing by me this long. I didn't blame her. Because I knew. They weren't going to stop. They wanted me hopeless. They wanted me gone. The morning after leaving Jenna's apartment, I sat alone in a small cafe on the south side of the city, an old laptop on loan from Mr. Richard, open in front of me. Harold's USB was plugged into the side, its red light blinking. Inside was a labyrinth of data, layers upon layers of evidence, notes, video clips, and encrypted files. I had reviewed most of it with Mr. Richard, but this time I noticed a folder I hadn't opened before. Legacy_raw. I typed the password 3 times. My grandfather's real name, his birth year, and his favorite phrase he used to repeat to me. The wind doesn't decide where you go. You do. The screen lit up. A video started playing. Harold sat before the camera, thin but sharp, his eyes carrying that same stern look I'd seen when he once shut down a bad investment plan during a board meeting. Clara, he began, voice slow and clear. If you're watching this, then everything I feared has become reality. I couldn't blink. He was looking straight into the lens, as if speaking to me in the present. I've stored all the documents you need to prove my mental capacity, at the time the will was signed, all medical evaluations. From Dr. Jonas, who's been monitoring me for the past 4 years, are in the folder, medical_official. There are even audio recordings of my cognitive assessments. No one can deny my legal capacity, unless they commit fraud. His tone dropped. Gregory Phillips, my former attorney, may have been bribed. I suspect he'll cooperate, if Rebecca and Dennis attempt to meddle with the will. If that happens, go to Lawrence Greer, the co-founder of Lexington Timber. I looked up. Lawrence Greer? I thought he'd retired from the industry long ago. Lawrence is the only one I trust outside of Richard, Harold continued. And he's overseeing part of the assets I kept off the books. The screen went black for a few seconds, then switched to a shot of him holding a black envelope. Inside this envelope are login credentials for 3 bank accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands. The total is $2 million. No one but you knows they exist. Use that money to fight, Clara. Don't let them corner you. And don't fall into the trap of revenge. You don't need to destroy them. You only need to win. I froze. In the quiet cafe, only the fan whirred steadily. What I now held. This video, the medical evaluations, audio recordings of past board meetings, and now, secret financial accounts, was no longer just evidence. This was the foundation of a full-blown counterattack. I called Mr. Richard. Richard, do you know where Mr. Lawrence Greer is right now? I asked, still scrolling through the files. A pause. Lawrence moved to the Charlottesville area in Virginia. He's been off the radar since selling his final shares. But I do have his number. Clara, are you sure? Lawrence is notoriously private. Grandpa mentioned him in the video, I said. He'll understand. 3 hours later I had a meeting scheduled. Mr. Lawrence welcomed me into his cabin, nestled in the Blue Ridge Hills. He was nearly 70, white-haired, his features sharp like a man who'd never truly left the boardroom. You look like Harold, he said, skipping any pleasantries. The eyes, the stance. I said nothing, just handed him the USB. He watched the entire video, never once interrupting. When the screen finally went black, he sat still for several minutes before speaking. He was right. Gregory's an opportunist, and Dennis, he always resented Harold for bringing you onto the junior advisory board. I once overheard him tell Brooke, once the old man dies, everything goes to the ones who actually deserve it. I looked at him, eyes unwavering. "Are you willing to help me?" He nodded. "I'm not doing this for legacy. But I owe Harold. And I won't stand by and watch them tear apart the company we spent nearly 3 decades building." He pulled an envelope from a small safe hidden behind a painting. "This is a copy of the company's founding charter, with a clause Harold secretly added in his final year. Any transfer of ownership must be approved by the Ethics Oversight Board. A panel of 3. Me, Mrs. Martha Jenkins, the former chief accountant, and Mr. Bruce Lanning, an independent auditor." I went numb. My family had no idea this existed. "Clara," he said, voice deeper now. "You don't have to destroy them, just expose the truth, and with everything you have, trust me, the truth will take care of the rest." End of chapter 11. I gripped the armrest, knowing once again I was no longer the daughter, dragged out of her home in the rain. 3 days after meeting with Mr. Lawrence, I sat in attorney Benjamin Stokes's office in downtown Nashville. The office was small, discreet, and incredibly quiet. No flashy signs, no elaborate reception. Just a small brass plaque by the door engraved in classic lettering. B. Stokes, Estate and Ethics Law. Benjamin was in his early 60s, tall and lean, speaking slowly but with pinpoint precision. During 3 uninterrupted hours of work, he didn't take his eyes off the screen once. He read through every email between my father and Gregory Phillips, listened to each audio recording, rewatched the video Mr. Harold had recorded before he passed. At the end of the session, he pushed back his chair, crossed his arms, and looked at me. "Miss Clara, with this amount of evidence, we're not just looking at an inheritance dispute. This could involve financial fraud, falsification of medical records, and possibly even money laundering." I nodded, my heart was racing. "Would you represent me?" Benjamin smiled. "I've turned down offers from 7 major corporations over the past 2 years. But I owe Harold. And I've never seen someone this betrayed, still standing tall." The counterattack plan began from 2 fronts, legal and quiet media pressure. On the legal side, Benjamin drafted a civil lawsuit targeting 3 individuals: Dennis Denton, my father, Rebecca Denton, my mother, and Gregory Phillips, our former family attorney. In the filing, he outlined allegations of forgery of testamentary documents, abuse of financial authority under guardianship, illegal asset transfers during pending probate. Meanwhile, I began working with Marcus Wynn, a private investigator introduced by Mr. Lawrence. Marcus had been a federal investigator who retired early after refusing to cover up a government corruption case. When I asked why he took this case, he simply said, "I hate people who use bloodlines to mask their crimes." Marcus had a rare skill tracking money trails. And he uncovered something that made even Benjamin frown. From a Lexington Timber corporate account, $98,000 had been wired to a casino hotel in Reno, Nevada, exactly 1 week after Brooke's credit card was hacked, as my mother had claimed to the press. Marcus tapped the screen of his laptop. "This transfer is marked as expense reimbursement." "Reimbursement for what? At a casino?" I asked, my throat dry. "Could be debt, or hush money," Marcus said without flinching. And that wasn't all. He'd discovered a string of suspicious transactions. My father had used a company's name to purchase a house in Orlando, registered under a shell corporation. The current occupant? A woman named Angela Holt. The same name as my mother's longtime friend, who once borrowed $50,000 for a community arts project no one ever heard of. Benjamin, on his end, found something else. Gregory Phillips had submitted a recently updated will to the local court, claiming Mr. Harold wanted all assets divided equally due to mental health instability. But the timestamp on that document? 3 weeks after my grandfather's death. And the printer that produced it? Registered to Gregory's office. "If we handle this right," Benjamin said in a strategy meeting, "we might not just win, we might see at least one of them face criminal charges. I chose not to go public. Everything stayed under the radar. But I wasn't alone. Mr. Richard became the communications hub. Marcus kept tracing fraudulent investments. Benjamin strategized the legal path like a chessboard. And Mr. Lawrence was quietly rallying the ethics oversight board he and Harold had once built, a board with the authority to veto any Lexington Timber asset transaction upon evidence of misconduct. One rainy night, I sat alone on Mr. Richard's balcony, overlooking the swaying barley fields. I thought of the moment my father dragged me out by my hair. Brooke's triumphant smile. My mother's saying I was a burden. The morning of the first hearing, the sky over Nashville was a heavy gray, almost mirroring what I felt inside, calm on the surface, churning beneath. I stepped out of Mr. Richard's car in front of the Davidson County Courthouse, wearing a charcoal suit my grandmother once left to my mother. I had it tailored to fit my shape. My hair was neatly combed and tied low, covering the small scar on my temple, the result of my father's shove last month. Across the steps, my parents and Brooke stood beside Gregory Phillips and 3 attorneys from the city's most prestigious law firm. They looked like they were headed to a gala, not a contested probate trial. My mother wore Chanel sunglasses, pretending not to see me. My father turned away the moment our eyes met. Brooke smirked, just enough for me to notice. But this time, I wasn't Clara, being dragged through the rain. I was Clara Denton, the rightful heir to Lexington Timber, and I was here to reclaim everything that had been stolen. As plaintiff, I presented 3 main allegations: will forgery, abuse of fiduciary authority, and deliberate obstruction of legal heir access to estate assets. The defendants, my parents, Brooke and Gregory, flatly denied all charges, claiming Mr. Harold was no longer mentally competent when signing the will and that he was manipulated by Clara in his final days. Judge Eva Ree Rollins, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with a reputation for cutting through courtroom theatrics, presided over the case. From her opening remarks, she made her stance clear. We are not here to rule on emotions, we rule on evidence. And that's exactly what we had. Benjamin began with a 21-minute video Mr. Harold had recorded 1 month before his death. His image appeared on the courtroom screen, frail, yes, but eyes sharp, hands slightly trembling, voice firm. In the video he stated clearly, I, Harold Denton, in a sound and lucid state of mind, leave all operational shares of Lexington Timber and the Bell River Estate to my granddaughter, Clara Denton. I have a specific reason: her capability, her integrity, and her commitment to this legacy. When he spoke my father's name, Dennis, my father's face froze. Mr. Harold called him financially reckless and more concerned with social standing than ethics. About my mother he simply said, chooses silence to preserve peace, even when it harms the company. As for Brooke, his tone was gentle but firm. I love her like my own, but I can't entrust a legacy to someone who's never held a job longer than 3 months. Next came the testimony of Dr. Jonas, Mr. Harold's physician for the final 3 years of his life. He presented medical records, cognitive evaluations, and footage from his final interview, recorded by Mr. Richard. Mr. Harold was fully competent, Dr. Jonas emphasized. He knew exactly what he was doing. I signed off on it, not because he was my patient, but because it was true. Then came Martha Jenkins, Mr. Harold's former assistant. Her hair silver and neatly tied back, her eyes steady. I was there when Mr. Harold signed the will, she said. No pressure, no doubt in his clarity. And I saw him cry when he said, I hope Clara won't need the law to prove what's right. Then the most unexpected witness. Peterson, our family's housekeeper of over 25 years. He wore an old suit, but his eyes didn't flinch. I saw Mr. Dennis drag Miss Clara out of the house. I heard Mrs. Rebecca say, as long as she's gone, everything can be sorted later. And I once overheard Gregory Phillips discuss with Mr. Dennis about drafting a more controllable version of the will. The courtroom fell silent. My father shut his eyes, my mother looked away. Gregory flushed, wiping sweat from his brow, though the room was cool. Finally, Benjamin wrapped up with a thick file, containing financial records showing Brooke used company funds to cover gambling debts. Emails from Gregory to my father discussing how to soften the will's language. Handwritten journals from Mr. Harold, provided by Mr. Lawrence, in which he wrote, "If I die, and Clara is shut out, the law must be her final refuge. I trust Clara. And I believe the truth will outlive any performance." 3 days later, the ruling came. Judge Rollins entered with a stern expression. Based on the evidence, consistent testimony, and verified legal documentation, she said, "The court finds that the will, signed by Mr. Harold Denton, is valid, and reflects his genuine intent." I held my breath. All inheritance rights and shares are hereby restored to Clara Denton. Furthermore, this court orders the immediate suspension of Mr. Dennis Denton and Mrs. Rebecca Denton from any executive role at Lexington Timber. Gregory Phillips will be referred to the State Bar for professional ethics review. I didn't cry. I simply stood, nodded at the judge, and turned to face them, my parents Brooke, Gregory, still frozen in their seats like stone statues. On a December morning, I returned to Lexington Timber Group, as mist still clung to the treetops outside the 19th floor window. When the elevator doors opened, no one looked at me like I didn't belong anymore. They knew who I was, and this time, no one could take that away. The CEO office remained unchanged, the old brown leather chair, the oak desk with worn corners from when Harold was still alive. But the nameplate on the desk had been replaced. Clara Denton, CEO. The first thing I did wasn't to hold a press conference, nor to launch the mass firings people had gossiped about. I simply called a meeting with accounting, legal, and senior HR. On the screen, I laid out a 6-month restructuring plan. Cut vanity expenses. Cancel all shady contracts signed under my father's leadership. And establish the Harold Denton Ethics Fund. An internal initiative to protect whistleblowers. Someone asked, "What about your family? Mr. Dennis, Mrs. Rebecca, do they still have any role?" I answered clearly, without hesitation. "They are no longer affiliated with this company in any capacity, and they never will be." That afternoon, I signed an order to reclaim all assets my parents had misappropriated from Lexington Timber. The Bell River estate was quietly listed through a trust. My mother sent an email. Her first contact since the trial. "Clara, I know there were mistakes. But I'm still your mother, at least let us talk. Not about assets, but about blood." I read it. And deleted it. Brooke was the only one I agreed to meet in person. She showed up 15 minutes late, dressed unusually plain, an old knit coat, flat shoes, no makeup, no posing. When she saw me waiting in the cafe corner, she hesitated. Like she expected to be turned away. "I don't expect forgiveness," Brooke began, her voice softer than I'd ever heard. "I just wanted to thank you for not suing me." I looked at her, the one who had trampled over me since childhood. But now, her eyes held no arrogance, only exhaustion and confusion. I didn't bring up the past. Not the stolen things, the slander, or the day she laughed, while my father dragged me out of the house. I simply asked, "What are you planning to do next?" She stayed silent for a long moment, then pulled out a folded paper. "A registration form for a financial recovery and trauma counseling program in Atlanta. My therapist said I should write a real apology," she said. "But I don't think you need to read it. I just wanted to show you, I'm trying to start over." I nodded, placed a folder on the table and slid it toward her. "Inside is a scholarship from Grandpa's fund. If you truly want change, this means you won't have to depend on anyone anymore." She frowned. "What's the catch?" she asked. "None," I said. "But there won't be a second chance." Brooke burst into tears. For the first time in my life I saw real tears from her. Months later, Lexington Timber reported rising profits again. But what made me prouder was this. 12 employees whom my father had once fired for being a poor cultural fit, had been invited back, and 2 of them were now leading our most critical departments. I also finally purchased a small home on the east side of the city, a 2-story wooden house with a backyard full of lavender, just like Grandpa once dreamed for me. On the first anniversary of his passing, I visited his grave again. I placed a small wooden box in front of his headstone. Inside was the pocket watch he left me. I whispered, "You kept the time, I kept the promise." Later, I received letters from my father, through their attorney, wanting to discuss reconciliation. They cited everything: age, health, family honor. I never replied. Forgiveness isn't a ticket back. It's just how I let go of hate so I could move forward. And to me, justice isn't about bringing the wicked down. It's about preserving what's worth keeping. Grandpa once taught me, strong isn't who gets revenge, strong is who doesn't let pain turn them into what hurt them. Now I understand. I don't need to prove anything anymore. I just need to live true to myself and let silence speak for me. Clara's story is clear proof that real family isn't built on blood, but on integrity and resilience. In real life, some people called relatives will trample you for greed. Speaking up, protecting yourself, and setting boundaries isn't betrayal. It's the first step toward healing. Sometimes, the greatest strength doesn't lie in revenge, but in standing firm, keeping your dignity through betrayal, and starting over on your own terms. What do you think about Clara's choices and her journey? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, real-life stories about family and the lessons they leave behind.